Good evening. It is 7 p.m. Wednesday, April 27th, 2016. This is a public meeting of the Speedway Board of Zoning Appeals. I am Mike Simonson, Chairman of the Board. Board members in attendance tonight are Steve Jones, our Vice Chairman, Tyler Carmichael, our Secretary, and Mike Allen. Also in attendance is Michelle Leidy, our Recording Secretary, and Kathleen Blackham, representing the Indianapolis Department of Metropolitan Development Planning Division. Have all who wish to speak been sworn in? Thank you. Would all please mute or turn off any cell phones at this time? Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We've already approved the minutes from our previous meeting, so I'll move on to the rules for our meeting. Petitioner and remonstrator or proponents will each have 15 minutes to present their evidence. We will then hear from Ms. Blackham with her report from staff. After that, there will be a 5-minute rebuttal period. First order of business tonight is variance 2016 DBS 001 1304 Olin Avenue. Will the petitioner or their representative please step to the podium, state their name and address for the record?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Board of Zoning Appeals. My name is Ian Nicolini with professional offices at 1450 North Lyndhurst Drive. I'm here on the petition 2016 DBS 001, requesting a variance from the signage regulations from the county zoning ordinance. You'll notice in your petition, Mr. Chairman, the owner of the property is actually the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Give a little bit of history there. In the 1960s, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway granted a permanent easement to the town of Speedway to locate a water tower on the site. Hence the subject of the petition this evening. And as such, as the owner, they're required to consent to any petitions on their land. That letter of consent was included in the packet that we submitted as part of this application. However, since the petition and improvements contemplated variance discussed herein relate more to the town of Speedway and Speedway Waterworks, I am here as the petitioner. I can, Mr. Chairman, briefly talk about our request. Many of you are familiar. It's hard to miss the water tower on 16th Street. It's also increasingly difficult to miss the improvements, landscape, hardscape, and otherwise on Crawfordsville Road as part of the Holman Memorial Way. In 2014, the improvements along Holman Memorial Way in the right-of-way were dedicated as the responsibility of the town of Speedway. So that's the landscaping, the hardscape, planning considerations related to the corridor. And unfortunately, we took on that responsibility without a budget for doing so. So what we've looked at is determining ways to capitalize existing assets within the corridor to help pay for improvements and maintenance of the corridor. This is, by way of example, landscaping bills for Holman Memorial Way, about $60,000 per year. That doesn't include any of the maintenance of the towers, signs, and banners, which have been up for 10-plus years now, and are obviously showing signs of wear. So, in an effort to find ways to capitalize on assets that are otherwise not being used in the corridor, we partnered, the Speedway Town Council, on my recommendation, partnered with a company called Clean Zone Marketing to analyze the possibility of utilizing the space between the legs of the water tower to house temporary mesh advertising panels. Those panels would essentially be used for different advertisers, and that would be the maintenance responsibility of Clean Zone Marketing. The contract itself contemplates that 50% of the revenue from rental of the space will be available to the town of Speedway There's been a tremendous amount of interest already. The benefit of doing them as perforated banners means that they're easy to reproduce. There's not a high cost. It's not a permanent structure. You take one down, you put the next up. You can sell them for different race events and take them down at the end of the season. And surely the presence of large banners on 16th Street isn't something that comes as a surprise to any members of the commission or anyone with a driver's license, or the ability to see as they're driving down 16th Street. There's plenty of opportunities to notice banners on buildings, in grandstands, suspended from hardscape improvements in the district. So we thought this was an innovative way to be able to fund an important corridor, and to do so in a way that doesn't detract from the corridor. It essentially reproduces the conditions that you would see during race and event season at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And so in order to do so, we're required to provide a request, I should say, a developmental variance from the sign regulations. I'll draw everyone's attention. We're the only one applying for the variance, despite the presence of the banners out there. It's important for us to make sure that as representatives of this planning process, especially as it relates to the speed zone improvements, that we are adhering to those procedures, hence this evening's petition. I should mention also for the record that at a public hearing earlier this evening, the special hearing examiner recommended approval of the use petition, of the approval petition, I should say, for this request as well. I'm happy to answer any questions you guys have.
Whose responsibility to sell the ads? Would that be the town or the IMS?
That would be our partner, Clean Zone Marketing. So their job is to sell. The content of the advertisements actually has a two-stage approval process. The town has to approve the content, as does the Indianapolis Motor Speedway as owner of the underlying property.
But the Indianapolis Motor Speedway does not profit from this?
That is correct.
It's just that it's because it's on their land?
That is correct.
What is the projected revenue for the signage?
So it's probably difficult to say because they've really only started selling for events in the month of May. If the panels were sold at the recommended rates, and there are indications that that will be the case, that'd bring about $50,000 for the month of May to the town of Speedway. However, like I said, you can change those out with different messaging and for different events, so the revenue potential increases as the season goes on. This is somewhat innovative. There's not a lot of examples of places using public infrastructure assets like this. We're trying to find innovative ways to fund vital community development and public services that doesn't come from taxes. For those of us that are familiar with how government, schools, counties are funded in Indiana, that's an increasingly difficult proposition, raising the need for us to find innovative solutions to fund public improvements. I think, though, with that said, I would also probably be remiss if I didn't also mention that our first and foremost primary concern is making sure that this can be accomplished safely. If our engineers and technical experts in the Department of Waterworks don't check off on the design and approve the banners, their loads, and can do so without being a risk to health and safety or a risk to the asset and infrastructure, if we can't accomplish that, they won't go up. Despite the revenue potential, it doesn't make a lot of common sense for us to damage vital infrastructure as part of the process. We think that can be accomplished fairly easily. It's just a matter of verifying it and making sure that we go through the appropriate process to make sure that those standards are in place and that we all understand what those loads, what the impact, and what the design parameters will be for the project.
Ian, when you say 50,000, is that just for the one event per
Yes.
panel, or
That
panel?
is 4 panels, 4 of the 5 panels at the agreed upon or at the stipulated price divided by 2, 50%.
That's per event or per season?
So right now, that would cover us through May.
Okay.
Probably into June. There probably won't be like a between May and Brickyard period.
So
that
the
sort of gets
Brickyard
you
would
up
be
to the-
another opportunity for
Correct.
revenue.
As could the air race.
Based on demand.
So between the activities or the events, will the panels from the previous events stay put until there's a need to replace them, or will they come down and then at the next
Are they going to be,
time for the event, will they put the new panels up?
They'll be down October 1st, no matter what,
Okay?
and down until the end of April. So there won't be any panels during that period of time.
So
But then,
when the 500 is finished,
Mm-hmm.
there's roughly 2 months till the Brickyard.
yep,
Will those 500 advertisers be in place until 2 or 3 weeks before the Brickyard, where new advertisers would presumably go up in place of them?
there's a few different ways we've looked at doing it through the month of May, or doing it through the month of May and then starting a new period that would go through Brickyard, or really trying to maximize the value of the month of May and extending that into the period preceding the Brickyard. I'm going to defer to our marketing pros on which one of those options is best. We've essentially left that up to them, whichever one is going to maximize value.
so is there ever going to be a time when they won't be up there in this April to October? So once they go up, then they stay up, and then you may change them for the next event, but there will always be something up there, basically?
I could certainly envision a scenario in which the contract period, when the advertisements were up, if a subsequent sale wasn't made, it would probably make sense to take that banner down at the end of its sale period. That would be our directive, would be to proceed that way, unless there's a compelling reason why it would need to remain.
Okay.
But some of that's going to come down to demand.
So, but there will be potentially a defined period of time of display for a particular advertiser.
Correct.
And after that time, it's at the discretion of the town or the sign company to remove the panel if they're not wanting to give away free advertising, essentially.
Correct. Assuming this petition is approved, that is how we'll proceed.
Ian, go ahead, Steve.
Will be working with the marketing people?
Correct.
Okay.
Is there any regulation on who can advertise on those banners?
We have exclusive authority as to the content and advertisers. So we can reject any advertiser or their content for any reason or for no reason, as does the Indianapolis Motor Speedway.
So there's some existing advertising on Homeland Memorial Way. Do you know what the income is from that?
Currently, we haven't sold those. We're in the process of negotiating another a contract that will replace the Holman Memorial banners for the 100th running with new content. We're negotiating those being changed over.
So even the lighted signs that are down closer to the interstate
Correct.
and all the other just banners that work their way eastward towards the track?
With the exception of every other banner on Main Street that we've just used, where we use Main Street or Speedway specific or business specific banner signage, or 100th running specific banner signage. With the exception of those, we're going to be replacing the, I think it's the greatest spectacle in racing, or no, Racing Capital of the World banners that are up there now. The backlit signs would certainly be a part of that. What we're doing right now is just working on content with an advertising partner on those to try and get that changed out in time for the month of May. That'll also bring in additional revenue into the district to allow us to continue to maintain and improve what's a pretty important corridor for the town of Speedway. I mean, we have 350,000 sets of eyeballs on the town, on our business development. A lot of folks use the month of May as a sort of measuring stick, as a sort of touchstone for what we've accomplished in the town of Speedway. We want to put that as our best foot forward and be able to maintain those improvements. There's streetscape and public art and hardscape is wonderful if it's maintained, but signs of degradation in hardscape and streetscapes are pretty hard to miss. When bright red oil towers start turning pink, we need to start figuring out ways to pay for how to fix them.
So all the revenue generated either from the banners or the other advertising opportunities on Holman Memorial Way, all that is earmarked specifically for maintenance and upkeep and improvements to the corridor?
That is our intent. That's our commitment. Really, I mean, from a practical perspective, even if we sold enough advertising revenue to maintain the landscaping, that's not going to keep the towers from degrading. Yeah. That's not going to keep the brick structures from needing to be tuck pointed. I mean, all of that work continues.
Sure.
And so for us, if it gets us a couple of years ahead in terms of how we pay for the landscaping improvements, wonderful. But if it sets us up with a sort of non-reverting fund that we can use for those capital improvements, then that's how we'll pursue it. Because our other options are fairly limited. Our other options are essentially, tax-based.
Because right now you're looking at roughly $100,000 a year with the two big events. If it's $50,000 per race of potential revenue, and then $60,000 of which would be earmarked for the direct cost of the landscape.
No, our intention is that all the advertising-related revenues for the corridor would go back into the corridor.
Okay.
That includes the tower. That includes the oil
all the other
banners.
maintenance and
Yeah,
upkeep,
I mean,
and any other improvements as money would allow.
Correct. It's a sizable. I mean, look, if we let that continue without proper maintenance, the replacement cost of that is going to be astronomical.
Absolutely.
So it behooves us to make sure that we're planning ahead and trying to be proactive.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Ms. Blackham, you're up.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Kathleen Blackham with the Department of Metropolitan Development. Mr. Nicolini has provided a thorough explanation of what this request is about. And you will note that staff is recommending denial of this, and there are two reasons primarily. The first one being that first of all, our staff views these signs and these banners as outdoor advertising, and it's off premises. So the two reasons, in the SC2 district, those advertising, off-premise advertising signs are not permitted, nor are they permitted in the sign regulations. Now, those outdoor advertising signs are permitted in some districts under the sign regulations, but not in any special districts. And as you know, the SZ2 district is a special district. The other concern staff has relates to the size of these banners. They're about 1,000 square feet. The maximum that's permitted under the sign regulations is 672 square feet. So they are much larger. And the other requirement is that these advertising signs have a 1,000-foot separation between them, and there would not be any meaningful separation of those. And then lastly, staff is concerned about the distance from the 16th Street and just the fact that it will be a very visible structure. And other than that, staff would have no further comments unless you have some questions that I hopefully can answer.
When you mentioned the distance from 16th Street, that it's not far enough back, or it's too far back?
It's too close to 16th Street. Yeah.
What would a preferable distance be? The water tower seems to be quite a ways off the road.
It's about a quarter of a mile, and again, these signs they're 1,000 square feet, so they're easily visible. It would be nice if they would be further back from 16th Street.
Billboards along the highway are
they're
virtually right on the highway.
Yep, they are. They are.
That's why I was questioning the
Yeah.
distance aspect. Okay. Other questions?
Nope.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks.
To the extent humanly possible, I'll be brief in my rebuttal. I'd be remiss if I didn't say on the record that Kathleen and the DMD's recommendation is well researched, it's well contemplated, and I completely understand an entity that has to regulate zoning throughout Marion County and has to be concerned about precedent. I completely understand their recommendation, and while I obviously disagree with it in this particular instance, there's a few things that I want to point out. One, there's not a compliant sign on 16th Street. There's not a compliant banner. Other than our road signs, you won't see much in the way of compliance. It's part of the race experience. The fact that you've got 600 square foot driver heads under each grandstand, that you've got advertisers, means that, you know, from a person who's concerned about economic development about as much as anything else that concerns me as a professional, that's a sign to me that there's investment going on, that there's an opportunity here for us to really capitalize on a captive audience and to leverage those improvements into further improvements within the community. And I think that's a way that we can sustain this. I don't want to, but I would also agree that Kathleen's recommendation from a pure planning and zoning implementation perspective makes sense. But the job of the Board of Zoning Appeals is to consider the findings of fact that relate to a project and conditions, especially conditions specific to the zoning variance request. And I will add this. The specific condition is the district, is the proximity to the race improvements, or the crowds, the existing advertising, the nature of that corridor on 16th Street. Thank you very much.
Ian, one question. How long is your agreement with the marketing company that's going to sell these advertisements?
It's a 2-year period. It is a 2-year extension after that, if both parties agree, and it is severable basically at any point in time.
Okay.
So is there a end date for this variance, or is it perpetual?
We intended this to be perpetual so that we didn't have to pay the filing fees for a public hearing every year for something that could be consistent.
Okay.
Although we paid ourselves, so either way. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll entertain a motion at this time.
Does she get a rebuttal?
Entertain a motion for,
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Petition 2016 DVS 001 is approved. 4-0.
congratulations. At this time, we need to act on a procedural thing for the May 4th hearing. It was brought to our attention today that the petitioner has failed to adequately notify through mailing the adjoining property owners for that hearing. So I will ask for a motion at this time to continue that variance to the June hearing.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second it.
Motion and second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries 4-0.
So we won't have a meeting the next Tuesday?
There is no meeting next week at this point in time. So, is there any other business to come before the board? Our next scheduled meeting will be June 1st, 2016, at 7 p.m. here in Town Hall. We are adjourned at 7:25.